Attention viewers, due to the gripping nature of tonight's program, no one will be admitted after the first 10 minutes. I'm Pat Inniss, and this is Freethinking 101. Our guest tonight is Rance Traxler. Rance is going to talk to us on the subject of evolution, creationism, and how our knowledge of dinosaur species proves the former and disproves the latter. Rance is an educator and scientist and quite an avid dinosaur enthusiast. Thanks for being with us tonight, Rance.
You're welcome.
I understand you saw something interesting on the drive over here tonight.
Yes, I did. I saw a group of real live dinosaurs as I was driving by.
Now, wait a minute. Did you stop by the bar before you came here, or?
No, I'll explain later, but I did see some living dinosaurs.
You saw some living dinosaurs. Okay, well, I can't wait for that one. But anyway, tell us a little bit about dinosaurs. Anyway, I guess most people's conception of dinosaurs is what they see in the movie with Raquel Welch running away from one, you know, dressed in bear skins or something like that. And they have an image of humans, you know, huddling in caves to hide from them. Now, what is this deal about dinosaurs and people?
Well, dinosaurs and people did not live together. They were separated by about 60 million years. Give you an example on this chart here. 1 inch equals 10 million years. So the dinosaurs occupied from about 225 million years to 65 million years ago, a very long period of time. Man, on the other hand, only occupies the last half inch on the chart because the family of man has only been around the last 10 to 5 million years, and the species, Homo sapiens, if it was on this chart, would be just a very thin line at the top because the species has only been around 50,000, 100 to 50,000 years.
So you're saying then that there's all this stuff about humans and seeing dinosaurs and hunting dinosaurs and being hunted by dinosaurs is limited strictly to the realm of science fiction, right?
That's solely in fiction. It's in the mind of Hollywood producers.
Hollywood producers, right. But, you know, you've got a lot of other lines on this chart, and I see some of them, you know, that look kind of familiar. I know one of your lines there says reptiles, it says turtles, and they go way back here too, and we are contemporary with modern reptiles and turtles at least, aren't we? So
right. This is called a phylogeny, or you might say a family tree of the reptiles. Now the dinosaurs only occupy here and here, these two sections here. All the rest of these are other types of reptiles, and some of them are still living. Those that are living today has the line drawn to the top, today being at the very top of this. Mm-hmm. So this is the family tree of the reptiles.
Okay. And I guess this line up at the little space with man, you could probably even divide that into Neanderthal man and Homo erectus and like that, and it'd be even a little tinier little slivers of line, how compared to this big line for all the, you know, the dinosaurs and the reptiles and everything.
If I were to do this same chart for the mammals, at this point, this line would become like a bush and would expand to cover almost the entire page, because at this point, when the dinosaurs died, the mammals underwent rapid evolution to fill all the niches left by not only the dinosaurs, but the pterosaurs, mosasaurs, and all the other extinct reptiles. So I made it very simple here to show only one line for the mammals.
Mm-hmm. It's one line for the mammals, but it goes down here and it branches off from a line that you've got marked mammal-like reptiles. So mammals actually were derived from reptiles.
Right. The mammal-like reptiles, and I have some examples here. This right here is one, Dimetrodon, commonly referred to as a dinosaur, although it is very distantly related from a dinosaur, had a big sail on its back. It was the first active hunting carnivore, and it probably used its sail to regulate its body temperature so that it can warm itself up and hunt more aggressively. And on this chart, it would be right about here, way even before the dinosaurs lived. The dinosaurs appeared about 225 million years ago. Dimetrodon lived way before the dinosaurs, and it was one of the early mammal-like reptiles. As the mammal-like reptiles evolved more, they became more mammal-like. Some of them even show indications that they may have had hair on their bodies. And there were several. They gradually, over this period of time, evolved more mammal-like characteristics until eventually they blended so much into the mammals that scientists had to draw an arbitrary line somewhere and say, all right, this one characteristic, if it has it, it's a mammal. If it doesn't have it, it's a mammal-like reptile. That's how gradual the change is at this point.
Well, we were talking before the show recently about one of the recent finds that they had. You mentioned that jaw bones are really one of the things that scientists look for to distinguish whether a remain is from a reptile or a mammal. And that has something to do with the development of the teeth, I assume?
Right. The mammal-like reptiles had many bones in their lower jaw, just like all reptiles and even birds do, and fish and amphibians. Mammals living today are unique that they have only one bone in the lower jaw. And the dividing characteristic they came up with was that a certain bone, the only one remaining in the mammal jaw, articulates with another bone in the skull. If they have that jaw joint, it's a mammal. If it has the old reptilian jaw joint, it's a reptile. But unfortunately, or I should say fortunately, in South America about 10, 20 years ago, they found a fossil of a mammal-like reptile that the jaw joint incorporated all four bones. It was even one which had both the mammalian and the reptilian jaw joints. So they had to go to a secondary characteristic involving the shape of the molars to determine that it was a reptile and not one of the early mammals.
Just when you think you got it licked, huh? Something comes along, and well, that's interesting because I guess my very coarse knowledge, they always taught you, well, mammals had molars and different types of teeth. Reptiles just tend to have the spike type teeth. One homodonts, I guess, is the term that they use. But that's really doesn't represent the cutting edge of science now in distinguishing these transitional forms.
The problem is that when we talk about reptiles in a science class, we usually talk about living ones, and we have very few living ones. Now, if you were to take the fossil examples that you had, many of them had great variety of teeth. They had different shaped teeth. Some of them, even the mammal-like reptiles, even had canine teeth that came out below the jaw and teeth of different size. So if we had more of the extinct forms of reptiles living today, there would be a greater variety to reptiles than what you generally think of as lizards and snakes.
That's good. Well, we mentioned that we were going to talk a little bit about creationism and what this all has to do with that. And one of the things that the creationists have been pointing to prove that that really this kind of chart would be inaccurate, that humans and dinosaurs really were contemporary, was these fossil, what they claim to be fossil remains of footprints of dinosaurs and humans laid in the same riverbed. That's down in Texas. Could you tell us a little bit about that, Rance?
Yes, they did find several tracks of actual dinosaurs in Cretaceous, which would be about this period, say 100 million years ago, in limestone in Texas along the Paluxy River. Now, during the Depression, many of the locals there used to take the limestone and chisel out giant footprints, humongous footprints, and sell to the tourists to make some money. And it happened that about 10, 20 years ago, some creationists came there and they bought the footprints hook, line, and sinker. They were vulnerable tourists, I guess, to the region. And since then, they have been claiming to find footprints. But in every man track that they claim to have found, most of them have been scientifically shown to be dinosaur footprints that after the dinosaur took his foot out of the soft mud oozed back in, filling in most of the track except for a little oval depression in the middle, the center of the track. And after it weathers down, you could see fully the bird-like imprint of the large dinosaur track. Other tracks that they claim are man tracks have proven to be weathered features in the limestone that bear no similarity with any mammal tracks of any type, because they also claim to have tracks of saber-toothed cats in the limestone there and other animals which did not live at the same time as the dinosaurs. They're looking at the limestone and they claim to have found just about everything there.
Well, I guess when they find the track and it says Nike on it, then I might be convinced, huh?
Yes.
Well, you brought along quite an assortment of toys tonight, and this is really an impressive array. These aren't all to scale, I take it.
No, they're not.
Can you tell us what some of these are? You already introduced us to Dimetrodon over there.
Okay, most of these, about 50% of these or more, maybe 75%, are dinosaurs. And I brought most of them as dinosaurs. Some of the things, well, if I may refer to the chart here for a moment, the early reptiles gave rise to three groups. You have one group that's still living today, and that's the turtles, the most primitive living reptiles. Another group were the mammal-like reptiles, which gave rise to the mammals and eventually man. And the third group branched out even further. The first group went back into the sea. They were land reptiles that went back into the sea and highly evolved to live in the sea. And here's a good example of them. What does it look like to you?
Well, it looks almost just like Flipper.
Yes, it does look like a dolphin. In fact, it's an example of convergent evolution where two organisms unrelated, as you can see, ichthyosaurs are here and mammals being up here, two organisms adapting to live in the same environment evolved to look similar. And also, dolphins would be up here on our time scale. Ichthyosaurs lived during this time. They did not live at the same time also.
That was an air breather?
This was an air breather. It had nostrils. And another key to point out, all of the whales and other living cetacean mammals, their fluke is horizontal. This one has a vertical fluke, and the backbone, which is very unusual, it's only found in reptiles that have went back to the sea, curves down into the bottom. But this type, you see, the front legs were totally evolved into flippers, and it still had the bones in there, but it was totally flippers. We have found such good specimens of this that we have been able to determine that it gave live birth in the water because it couldn't come out on land to lay eggs. We've actually found fossils of these that had embryos inside of it, and one even in the process of giving birth. And also some of the fossils were in such fine-grained sediment that fleshy features without bones, like this fin and this fin, showed up, and even the pigments. In real life, this was dark blue on the top and light gray underneath, so that just like with modern fish, a predator looking up from below would see a light bottom, and looking down would see a dark top, and it would be, well, camouflage.
It's pretty impressive.
Had the same ecological niche, and a great example of convergent evolution.
One thing I want to point out about your chart here, Rance, did you realize that most of the names represented on your charts are actually the same names as a lot of popular rock groups now?
No, I did not realize that. I don't keep up with pop groups.
Okay. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, some of the other groups, another type of transition that we have in a fossil record is the plesiosaurs. The ancestors of the plesiosaurs were the nothosaurs. Now, I don't have any nothosaurs here, but they were land-living reptiles. They had long necks, but huge heads, and their feet had claws on the end of it. These were about 248, 213 million years ago, the nothosaurs. Their ancestors were the plesiosaurs and pliosaurs, and I believe a lot of people remember seeing this, the standard plesiosaur. This is the typical plesiosaur with a long neck, small head. The legs, which were had the claws on, and nothosaurs are now completely evolved into flippers. And this one may have lived like a sea turtle, only rarely coming up on land, maybe just to lay its eggs. Another type of plesiosaur, which was even more of a terror in the water, was this type called a pliosaur. Its head is about as long as a man. In scale, a man would be about this way. He could swallow a man whole. And this is a giant, short-necked plesiosaur called a pliosaur, a real terror in its day.
Very impressive. Now, but one thing I might ask you now, another misconception I think people may have received from the movies and other popular sources is that, well, as well as showing humans being contemporary with dinosaurs, they tend to give you the impression that all dinosaurs are contemporary with each other, such as Dimetrodon. I think those are frequently portrayed in movies. They'll take a lizard and glue a big fin on its back,
Right.
and then they'll have him come up against something which is supposed to represent, I guess, a tyrannosaur or something like that. Now, I imagine a lot of these dinosaurs really never had the acquaintance of each other. Is that true?
Right. The dinosaurs were the ruling land, and I stress land because no dinosaurs lived in the water or flew in the air. They were all land, terrestrial reptiles, and they dominated for 150 million years, from about 65 million years ago to where they first appeared in the mid-Jurassic. They didn't become dominant until about 200 million years ago. And you'll find out that a lot of these dinosaurs that would not meet each other, like take Apatosaurus, which was erroneously called a Brontosaur. That was an error in the naming. They even had the wrong head on it. The correct name is Apatosaurus. Many times it is depicted fighting a Tyrannosaurus. And these two did not live at the same time, and I'll show you by a chart. They were related. They were called, Apatosaurus was a sauropod, and it lived in the late Jurassic right here. Mm-hmm. But Tyrannosaurus rex was one of the last and one of the most advanced large carnosaurs, and it lived in the late Cretaceous, at least about 60 million years later. Also Stegosaurus, which you see here, fighting with Tyrannosaurus. They did not live with each other because Stegosaurus was late Jurassic also, a contemporary of Apatosaurus. Now, Triceratops would have fought with Tyrannosaurus rex.
If Don King could have gotten that matchup, that would have been the bout of the century, I guess, huh?
There would have been some that would have been nice to have beheld.
Well, which was now, do you have the largest dinosaur depicted here?
Yes, probably the largest were the Brachiosaurs. They were the largest. And this right here, Brachiosaurus, is, they have found some relatives of him twice his size.
Now,
and
twice the size of...
Brachiosaurus is about the largest we have that we got a really large skeleton for, but they have found some bones like a shoulder blade that definitely belongs to a member of this family, closely related to him, but twice as large as Brachiosaurus's shoulder blade. So the dinosaur would have been twice as large as Brachiosaurus was, and he's already humongous. He can look into a 3-story window.
That'll come in handy once in a while. But maybe that they just found one bone of that.
Well, they found several. They found leg bones also, but the scale of it is twice as large as this one. They don't have a 100% complete skeleton like they have a Brachiosaurus.
Well, it could have been just a mock-up or prototype that they decided not to build. They said, it's too big, forget about it, you know. But can you give us an example, really, of one group? You know, this is one of the things with the creationists, I guess. They're always... You know, they try to promote their argument by saying there aren't any transitional types to prove evolution. How can evolution really be a scientific theory, and how can you say that the fossil evidence supports it if you don't find forms that lead from one end to the other? So are there really examples here of transitional species from one to another?
A nice transition, a very nice transition shows up here 225 million years ago in the late Jurassic, called Archaeopteryx. The ancestor of the Archaeopteryx, now it's the first bird, is classified as a bird again because of an arbitrary characteristic. It has feathers. By arbitrary classification, the scientists have ruled that any animal with feathers, you know, any vertebrate animal with feathers is a bird. So technically it's a bird. But several specimens of Archaeopteryx, when it was first found, the feather impressions were so faint that they were misclassified as small dinosaurs. This is an example of some of the small dinosaurs. These were smaller, slimmer relatives of Tyrannosaurus. These were small, fast, meat-eating dinosaurs. So some of the Archaeopteryx, many of the Archaeopteryx specimens were misclassified as examples of these dinosaurs until the faint impression of feathers were discovered. So if you take away the feathers, Archaeopteryx is 100% dinosaur. And it has reptilian characteristics that birds don't have. It had a long bony tail, just like this. It had feathers growing out of each side, but it had a long bony tail. It didn't have a horny beak. It had teeth, reptilian teeth in its jaw. It had quite a number of reptilian characteristics.
Now, I'm surprised that when you said the Archaeopteryx evolved from a reptile like, or a dinosaur like this, rather than something like this, this is like, well, this is a pterodon or a pterosaur or something like that?
Yes, this is a pterosaur, and some other examples of them here. These were cousins to the dinosaurs. They were the only flying reptiles. And to show you on the chart here, to show you that they were cousins, from this line here, this way are dinosaurs. Mm-hmm. So they're right next to the dinosaurs, the pterosaurs. The early forms were small. They still had long tails, lots of large heads with lots of teeth in them, just like their thecodont ancestors. But by the late Cretaceous, the pterosaurs evolved into graceful flyers. Many of them lost teeth to make themselves lighter. They lost a tail, and they evolved other features that made them lighter and better flyers. So they're commonly referred to as dinosaurs, but they're not. I should say that of the ruling reptiles, the archosaurs, we do have one living today. And that is the cousin to the pterosaurs and the cousins to the dinosaurs that's living today, and that's the crocodiles. Crocodiles are the most advanced living reptiles. They can even raise their body temperature higher than the environment by a few degrees. They got a 4-chambered heart. The mother takes care of its young much like a bird does. Crocodiles are the closest living relatives to the dinosaurs other than birds.
Okay. Well, yeah, now this brings us back to what you said at the beginning of the show. You said you saw some living dinosaurs. Exact words, I think.
Right. Well, by taxonomic rules, and you can, a lot of scientists accept this.
Wait a minute now, Rance. You whipped the word on me. Taxonomic. Now, does that have something to do with H&R Block or?
No, that has to deal with classifying living organisms. Since birds evolved from dinosaurs, they can still be considered dinosaurs.
Okay, well, I can still be considered an Australopithecine by that definition, can't I?
Not in a way. It's
not to my face, please. So it's
a little bit more complicated than that, but group-wise, you could say birds are a subgroup of dinosaurs. Birds, for a long time, have been called glorified reptiles, reptiles with feathers. So birds can be considered one type of dinosaur, the only type still living today, and the only type that we know of that did have feathers, although we have a lot of evidence that maybe some of the other dinosaurs at that time may have had the beginning of feathers. We have fossil evidence that some of the pterosaurs had hair-like structures on them to keep them warm. So these animals, these ruling reptiles that I mentioned here, the crocodiles and all, they were the most advanced of the reptiles, and many of them could have been very warm-blooded, active hunters. That's why I guess they dominated the earth for 150 million years. That could be why. Okay, so really what you're saying is that since the birds are descended from dinosaurs, there's ample evidence to prove that actually they are, I guess, the sole living representative of that. Is that a genus? No, just use the term group. Okay. The sole living representative of that group of animals. Okay. And so you told us that you'd seen a living dinosaur, which was technically correct, I guess. Technically, in scientific terminology. Scientifically. Okay. Well, we only got a couple more minutes left, Rance. Could you just hit on, please, for us, a couple of the other misconceptions about dinosaurs that are helping, or that creationists are helping to promote? Well, one of the things that I've seen quite a bit was that when the creationists show their version of a phylogeny, many times they would stick in animals that do not belong in it. Like I've seen one creationist phylogeny showing man, and in what they call the evolutionary path, they're quick to point out that they say this is what evolutionists say. Well, this is not what scientists say. This is their distorted view of what scientists say. But in that phylogeny, they would have a bird, they would have maybe a lizard, a crocodile, they'd have a frog. And as you can see by this chart, the crocodiles and birds were way far. The mammals branched off long before they appeared, and nowhere do crocodiles and birds lie in mammals or man's ancestry.
So creation science, basically the underpinnings of it aren't really good science to begin with, not even when they start off with what they consider a foundation in normal accepted science. They're distorting that to arrive at their conclusion.
Their textbook, they have published a textbook which they have tried to get introduced into biology classes in the public high schools. A judge in Indiana, which is a conservative state, ruled against the textbook being adopted by the State Textbook Commission because, first off, he ruled that the creationist textbook was really a religious document, not a scientific one to be used in a science class. And secondly, the science in it was so poor that it was lousy. It was erroneous. Yeah. It was so filled full of erroneous information that it was not suited for a science classroom.
Well, I'm glad we got you here to watch out for that kind of stuff. And I want to thank the viewers for joining us tonight. This has been Free Thinking 101. If you want to drop us a line, you can write P.O. Box 2931, the Rational Society of St. Louis, P.O. Box 2931, St. Louis, Missouri, 63130, or give us a call at 298-6649. Thanks a lot.